Welcome to With Great Responsibility as part of the National Book Festival. We're so glad you could join us today. I bet you have seen a Spider-Man movie, but did you know that Spider-Man came out of the pages of a comic book and that somebody drew the art and somebody else wrote the story 59 years ago? I'm Sarah Duke.
And I'm Megan Halsband.
And we're going to tell you the exciting and amazing story of how Spider-Man went from an artist rendering to a published comic book.
So we have a question for you. In what publication did Spider-Man first appear? We'll give you a minute to pick your answer in the poll, and then we'll see what you think.
And while you're filling out your poll answer, why don't we look at this splash page. This is the first page of the story that appeared, and you can see the shadow of a giant spider as well as a spider, Spider-Man and a spider, as well as a group of teenagers laughing as lonely, bookish Peter Parker stands aside.
All right, I think we've got our results. 59%. Wow.
We've got a smart audience today.
So, as most of you guessed, Amazing Fantasy 15 is where Spider-Man first appeared. Here is the library's copy from our collections, published in August of 1962, with art by Steve Ditko and the story by Stan Lee, which is what we're going to talk to you about today.
And there you can see on the screen, the splash page that I've brought today. It looks a lot tinier on a computer screen than it does in person, and that often surprises people. So before we get going, I want to show you an image of the Library of Congress. We are literally the Library of Congress, and this image was taken from the Capitol Dome. And underneath the red arrow is the Madison Building, where both Megan and I work. I work in the Princeton Photographs Division on the 3rd floor, and if you are over 16, you are welcome to get a reader's card and come in and have a moment with the original art in person or any of our other collections.
And I work in the newspaper and current periodical reading room, and you're welcome to come in and request comic books to look at. The library has one of the largest comic book collections in the world. You can be under the age of 16 as long as you're accompanied by a parent or a guardian. So one more question for you, or another question, I guess we should say. How did Peter Parker get his superpowers? We're going to put up a poll and give you a chance to try to take a guess, and then we'll show you in the original art.
I think they're going to know.
I hope so.
I mean, they knew that it was Amazing Fantasy 15.
It's
so
true.
I think we've got a smart audience today.
Oh, whoa, 100% of you got it correct. Nice. It kind of goes with the name. I mean, Spider-Man.
Right. So let's look at that moment where Peter Parker gets bitten by the radioactive spider. I'm used to seeing it in black and white.
And here you can see the detail of the black and white drawing next to the detail from the published color comic. And it's here that Peter first discovers, first gets bitten by the spider. And Sarah's going to talk to you a little bit about the next panels on the page where he discovers more about what his powers now are.
Right. Immediately after he gets bitten by the spider, Peter discovers that he feels a little odd and that, a car goes by and he jumps and discovers that he has the spider ability to cling to surfaces. And there's something I want to point out to you, because people talk about this as a throwaway story and a throwaway comic book, and it's not. They really deeply, deeply cared about all of the elements of the story. So if you look carefully in this image, you can see that the roof support has been altered. And we're going to go ahead and look at the text that's underneath this panel. Steve, make this a closed sedan, no arms hanging, don't imply wild, reckless driving. S. So let's look ahead at the published version. Can you tell that Steve Ditko altered that car?
I can't, personally. One of the things that I do find interesting about this page is, as you may have noticed in the original, some of the text has been changed. The "what" has white out underneath it, and it was changed. Although in our comic version, you can't actually read it, which is kind of interesting to me, thinking about how things change even during the printing process.
Absolutely. So Peter discovers that he has superpowers, and he starts to use them. And this is a page where he's experimenting with his strength. So I want to point out some details on the two central panels in the top and second row. So we have the image of the little boy looking up and spotting him. And then once he's been seen, Stan Lee doesn't want him to be seen again while he's practicing. So in the second image, where he's moving kind of down and sideways, there's a notation that says, "Steve, make this a dark alley. No one can see him."
So this is a good opportunity to point out, too, that in the panel on the left, you see that the mother says, "That's the last horror movie I'm taking you to." Many of you may know Spider-Man from the movies, so we're going to ask you another poll. What is your favorite Spider-Man movie? There are many over the years. We've selected a few as suggestions, so I'm curious to know which one is your favorite. I think mine might be Spider-Man from 2002, just because that's the first one that I saw. Or maybe even, you know, the Saturday morning cartoons from the 1980s, because I'm pretty sure I saw that television show. All right, it looks like, 45% of you are saying Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is a very recent, pretty good movie.
It was a very good movie.
Yeah. One of the things that the movies also do is they talk about how Peter gets his powers, how he uses his powers. And so going back to the original art, we'll see a little bit more about how he deals with this.
So one of the things that Peter does in this origin story, remember this is the original art for the first time that Spider-Man was ever appeared in a comic book. And one of the things that happens in the origin stories is that Peter goes to Crusher Hogan and to test his superpowers. He sees that he can get a bit of cash by taking on this man, and he just wants to test the limits of his powers, which he does, and discovers he has the strength of a gigantic spider. And Crusher Hogan is completely terrified by the prospect. So he wins his cash and moves ahead. And one of the great things about looking at original art, which you can't see in the comic book, are the changes that get made. So in the scene where Peter takes on Crusher Hogan and defeats him, there are people in the audience who are television producers. And in this particular panel, we know that the change happened at the inking stage because otherwise they just would have used an eraser. But because it happened at the inking stage, they had to use opaque white, or commonly called whiteout, but I don't think whiteout had been invented in 1962. So they covered it over, but enough of the ink comes through the opaque white that you can read that the guy in the middle who's saying sensational, fantastic, was originally going to be, the guy in the hat and the cigar in the foreground was going to be thinking it, but they gave him a new thought. And that tells me too that Stan Lee really cared about moving the story forward and creating a sense of narrative and a reason to turn the page.
So as you can see in the color version, you can't tell that there have been any changes. You know, the thought bubble looks like it's always supposed to have been there. One of the things that confuses me about this particular panel is the guy in the yellow in the second from the left. Why? Why is he yellow? I'm very curious how that ended up that color. And then the guy next to him is green. Anyway.
And why do you think that is
Well,
that way?
I thought maybe for perspective to show him that he's in the background, but honestly, I really don't know. In the next page, you'll see the guy in the foreground with the cigar talking to Peter, and he's telling him he's going to make him famous. And so,
yeah, so
this is a big moment.
This is a big moment. This is probably one of the most popular pages in the comic book. And let's look at the original page here, and you can see how big it is compared to me. This panel where Peter Parker dons his costume for the first time is really important. And then you have the development of the web shooters. Only a bookish bookworm who's a science major could have invented a device like this. And I must say, here at the Library of Congress, we love bookworms, especially bookworms who love comic books.
Yes. So you can see here a detail from the published comic, and you can see it goes from black and white to the classic red and blue that you might be used to. Spider-Man's costume has changed over time quite a bit. There's various costumes that go along with storylines, and I've picked a couple here. The one on the left is the symbiote black costume, which goes along with the Venom storyline, and then on the right is Miles Morales' black and red costume. And so I just wanted to show you a little bit more from the collection. And that brings us to our next question. Peter Parker has superpowers, a superhero costume, and a superhero name. But does that make him a superhero? So let's find out what you think. Yes or no?
And while you're picking your answers, we can come back to this page in the center where he's developing the web shooters, because every movie tells a story of the web shooters a little bit differently. But you can see here he's using kind of like a perfume atomizer. Maybe you have to be a certain age to remember perfume atomizers. I don't know.
All right, 60% of you say no, it doesn't. It doesn't make him a superhero, and we agree with you. Those things don't make him a superhero yet.
Yeah, no, it's not enough to be a superhero. You have to do things with good, right? Or for good.
Yeah. I think in the next page, you'll see he's embracing his celebrity status, and he has just appeared on television. He watches a criminal run by and doesn't really care about what's actually happening. You'll see that in this detail. And then on the right, you'll see him comment about his family and about how they're the only ones who really matter. And so the question is, you know, who is Peter responsible for as Spider-Man? And in the next page, you'll see how Lee and Ditko kind of talk about the celebrity status and the 1960s version of celebrity culture, which was newspaper headlines. You'll see those in this detail. You know, Spider-Man wins Showbiz Award. Today, you probably read about people on TikTok and Twitter and Instagram, but at that time, it was the newspapers. And this is a pretty interesting visual way of communicating that, I think.
Yeah, I think there's always a big tie-in between comic books and newspaper comic strips and other print media. They were all kind of like a circle kind of oriented toward marketing each other and promoting each other's products. I want to use this particular panel as an opportunity to talk about another aspect of the art. So let's look closely at that Spider-Man costume. So artists often have a shorthand that they use to create an effect visually. Steve Ditko could have inked around the spider's head and legs, and it would have looked pretty bad. And the colorist could have solved that in the published version of the comic book. But it also would have taken him a long time. So what he did is he just inked around an oval and then used opaque white to put in the legs and the head. And as you can see, he just put in those legs pretty roughly. I mean, some of the legs have feet and some of them are just straight lines. And that's probably fine because the comic book is so much smaller than the drawing that in reduction, most readers wouldn't have noticed the difference.
It's true. And part of Peter's evolution into becoming a superhero is when he puts on his costume. And we've talked a lot about the costume. And so one of the things that we want to talk to you about is what he does as a superhero. So spoiler alert, just in case anybody's not familiar with the storyline. Peter finds out that his Uncle Ben is killed. And this is the panel where he finds the policeman is telling him. And in the next detail, we see Peter angrily putting on his costume. You can see it here. And he's talking about how he's going to get his revenge or avenge his uncle. And in the next page, you'll see the full sort of chase scene with the criminal and the exciting part of the storyline, the confrontation.
Yeah, to me, this is the most Ditko-esque of all the pages in the story. And I don't know whether it was because he had relaxed into drawing the story or if he had been in a rush and he had to finish drawing the story. But Ditko always liked to play with black and white and reverse inking. And he also liked to build tension and suspense. So you see in the bottom 4 panels, you never see the criminal's face. And you're not going to because it's going to be as revealing to Spider-Man as it is to you. And this, to me, is probably the most Ditko-esque of all the panels in the story with those heavy, thick brush ink lines. And you notice how the rope is not inked, it's inked in reverse so that only the shadows of the rope show. So,
and this is the moment where Peter realizes his connection in this entire event. He realizes that this is the criminal that he let escape back in that panel that we showed you where he was coming out of his television appearance. And so it's here that he realizes that moment. And there was a particular element of the page that Ditko emphasized to work on that.
It's the eyes, right? You never see Spider-Man's eyes again. So this is the moment, for me, where Peter realizes that it is not enough just to have superpowers, that he has to use his energy to make the world a better place. If only he had stopped the criminal, his uncle might have been alive.
And so we come to the end of the story, basically. That the Spider-Man Eyes is almost one of the last panels. But it's another opportunity to talk about the collaboration that Sarah was talking about earlier too.
Right. So you see in the panel on the left, there's some another piece of marginalia, and this is not directed to Steve. It's directed to somebody who's going to talk to Steve because it's, sorry about this, have Steve move it up. And you can see that announcement. Be sure to see the next issue of Amazing Fantasy. And you are all experts. You have proven that with the polls, so that you all probably know this was the last issue of Amazing Fantasy. It was actually the only issue of Amazing Fantasy, right? It was Amazing Adult Fantasy, 1 through 14. And then it was Amazing Spider-Man #1 with a March 1963 publication date. So that little announcement banner forced Ditko to move it up. And if you look carefully between the policemen's heads, you can see penciling where the policemen were going to be so that the distance between the crook and the police was supposed to be a little further apart.
And, that's one of the final panels. The crook is caught. Spider-Man has done his job, although he's realizing a little bit of not buyer's remorse. Remorse over his actions. But the final panel is something that I wanted to talk to you about, because this is possibly one of the most misquoted lines in comic history. I was actually digging around on the internet, as one does now, last night to try to think of things that you guys might ask us in a few minutes. And this line is seriously not quoted correctly anywhere. It is, with great power, there must also come great responsibility. I bet most of you have not heard it that way. Usually it's a little bit shorter or something along those lines. So, I'd be curious to know how you've heard this iconic Spider-Man phrase. So we come to the end of the comic, and we'll leave you with the final page. Here you can see the color version and the original, which, I don't know, is always sort of cool to look at. And we want to say thank you for joining us in our discussion, and hope that you have some questions for us.
And we want to make sure that if you take anything away from our presentation today, that you learned about the collaboration between Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, that the art is 59 years old and located at the Library of Congress, and that it was not just a throwaway story in a last issue of a comic book. They worked very intently and very purposely on it.
So you can always get in touch with us on our websites, which you'll see in just a second.
And I want to, as well as in text, verbally thank Marvel Worldwide Incorporated for giving us permission to make this presentation as part of the National Book Festival today. And Megan and I are so grateful that you took time out of your day to make this part of your National Book Festival experience, and I hope you tune into other events that the Library of Congress is offering. And with that,
I think we're going to open it up to questions in the Q&A.
So the first question comes from Sandra. Why did the webbed bit under his arms disappear?
Sarah has thoughts on that one.
I do have thoughts. I had a Barry Kitson, who draws one of the Spider-Man stories, come. And that's actually, let's go back to an earlier web under the arms, because that's like a rush job there. It's pretty straight. It's pretty detailed. It's pretty filigree. It's really fussy. This was the first time he drew it. You can't keep that up in a multi-panel story. I think Megan's going to get a tight in.
Yep. There's one there, here and here in the original.
And you can see it here on this page here. That's a lot of inking. And yeah, it disappeared.
This question is from Margaret. Steve Ditko really got wild with his Doctor Strange work. It was pretty psychedelic. Do you see that at all in the Spider-Man comics?
Good question.
That is a good question. I think he was pretty tightly reined by Stan Lee. On the other hand, this is just the first story in a 4-story comic book. So we have Spider-Man, and then we have the Bell Ringer, which is kind of religious and ethereal, and it's another one of those where if you see the inked version, it's very different from the published version of the comic book. We have Man in the Mummy Case, which is one of my favorites, and then there are Martians Among Us. And so those are, I think, more controlled by Steve, although there is marginalia in 2 of those stories as well.
And I believe Doctor Strange is a few years later, so I think Steve's style probably evolved a little bit between this particular artwork and then when he develops that. Yeah. But a good question.
This question goes to the content of the comic. In this first issue, was Peter Parker given a definite age?
No,
I don't think so. I think it's just
he's a
he's
teenager.
teenager. Yeah.
He's a high school student. That's very clear that he's a high school student.
Hmm.
Yeah.
This question is for Sarah. Are there any notes or pencil drawings or marks on the back of any of the pages?
There are not. There is, however, a censor's stamp from March 5th, 1962, which tells you how far in advance this story was created in advance of publication.
Because remember, the date of publication on the comic is August 1962.
Right. Although it probably hit the stands in June or July.
June or July, yeah.
What's it like to be a curator at the Library of Congress, and what was your career path?
Oh, I'm going to let you go first because you're the curator.
I'm the curator. Megan's the reference librarian. So I like to misquote Bugs Bunny and say I made a left turn at Albuquerque. 30 years ago, last week, I came to the Library of Congress as a junior fellow, which was a 3-month, like an internship, a working internship. I had run out of funding at my university. I was a graduate student, and so I had the good blessing to come here and work with amazing collections, and I stayed. I have a master's and a PhD in history, and then I went and got a master's in library science. But I also, there's a lot to be gained by working on the job and reading.
And actually, I learned everything about what I currently do on the job. I came to the library almost exactly 13 years ago myself at the beginning of September in 2008. Fresh out of library school with a master's in library science and art history, and eventually made my way to the serials division where they said, we have the comic book collection, you have an art history degree. They go together. And I was like, sure, why not? And the rest is kind of history. You know, I've been working with this collection for over 10 years now, and it's amazing. It's been so much fun to learn all about this. You know, I learn something new every day, especially from our researchers, because they know more than I do a lot of the time, which is both intimidating and fun.
Do you see eras or style changes throughout the comic books after the early issues?
Actually, we didn't point out the one error that we saw in this comic book. In this storyline, there's the moment where he's going to avenge his uncle.
Oh, yeah.
And he pulls the hood over his body. And then here on the last page, the hood goes behind him. These days, comic book publishers have somebody who works on continuity. I don't think they did in 1962.
I definitely think, you know, there have been moments over the lifetime of the publication, but it's become much more of a organized process.
It's a Spider-Verse now.
Yeah.
Through history, have there been congressional representatives interested in the comic and graphic novel collections?
I am sure there are. In fact, we have a congresswoman whose father was a newspaper comic strip artist. And I'm blanking on her name and her father's name. Jackson?
Yes, Representative Sheila Jackson. And she came, we did a presentation for her last year, maybe. We have some of her father's work. And actually, I do have my own celebrity sort of congressperson experience. I got to meet Senator Leahy when he came a few years ago to the library. As some of you may know, Senator Leahy is a gigantic Batman fan. And I have had the good fortune to purchase the first issue of Batman for the library a few years ago. And so I got to show it to Senator Leahy, and he was very excited. That was pretty cool.
Sarah, who donated the original artwork to the library?
That is knowledge that I am going to walk out the door with. It was an anonymous gift. I am not revealing who donated it, but I will tell you this. It was donated with a spirit of generosity to this institution because we've been around for 2 centuries, over 2 centuries, 220 years, 221 years? Math. I'm an art curator, I'm not a mathematician. But because we've been around so long, and because we open our doors to not only the American people, but to researchers all over the world, I honor the spirit of the anonymous donation with making the art accessible to anybody over 16 who can obtain a researcher card and is willing to make an appointment to come and see the art.
What is the oldest and or most valuable comic in the library's collection?
The oldest is,
Oh, what's a comic?
well, that's complicated because it kind of depends on how you define what a comic book is and how you define what value is. So a lot of people consider Famous Funnies from 1933 to be the earliest modern comic. We do have a copy of that here at the library. Some people consider earlier publications that were sort of more graphic novel-y, I guess, in a certain way. And why am I blanking on his name? I'll think of it in a minute, but it was a European person who then published.
Franz Mazariel.
No.
Okay.
I'll think of it in a minute. Of course, I'm going to forget. We don't have the earliest version of his work, but we do have a copy of.
Oh, is it Topfer?
Topfer. Yes, thank you. We do have the famous Mr. Butterfly. I'm forgetting exactly. Sorry. So those are probably the oldest things that we have. We have, some early proto-comics from the 1910s too. The most valuable is a lot harder, actually, to...
It's hard to keep up.
Well,
It
yeah,
changes,
it's
like,
hard to keep up.
Every heritage auction changes the value.
Yeah, I will say this. The library, when we acquire materials, does not keep our comic books slabbed. And so if you're a collector and you know anything about how comics are sold, many of them are encased in plastic and graded and then sold. And it guarantees their condition and it gives them a certain authenticity for value. The Library of Congress cracks open those slabs when we buy stuff. And most people are horrified when I tell them that. But the reason is because we want people to be able to read it. So we inherently decrease comic book quote unquote value by doing that. But I feel like they're more valuable because people get to read them. So
Right. What's the point of having books if you can't
read them? So I know that's a non-answer to the question about value, but that's about as good as I've got.
Does the library have bound copies of old newspaper serial comics like those published in the early 1900s?
We do. So we have bound volumes of newspapers that include comics. You can actually see some of the color scans of our bound volumes of the New York Journal online in the library's digitized newspaper collections. It has quite a few color pages in it of comics. And one of the kind of superstars of that period is the Yellow Kids, which some of you may have heard of, famous American comic strip. We have additional ones, since the 19th century. For the most part, our newspapers are on microfilm, but we do have some select like comic inserts and other things for historical and display purposes.
And where would one find those digital images?
They will be, so if you search for New York Journal, Library of Congress, it should take you to the library's digital collections page. Or you can search, if you're on the library's homepage, loc.gov, there's a search box in the top, and one of the options in the drop-down menu is to search newspapers. So if you select newspapers and then type in New York Journal, it should pull up the color images of that. If you're not finding it, send us an Ask a Librarian question, and we'll pop that back in the chat in a little bit. You know, I may be the person who answers your question, so it's real people answering it. Now, hopefully you can find it there.
A follow-on to the digital question is how much content like this can be found online?
A fraction. Well, the question is, are you talking about online at the Library of Congress or online? Because the comics community is amazing about the content that, copyright, the Grand Comics Database. I mean, fans and scholars have done a great job of putting a lot of content on the internet. The Library of Congress is the copyright repository for the United States, so we're a little more cautious about what we digitize and make available, or when we do make copyrighted material available, we only release the small images. You have to be on site to see the larger images.
Yeah, we are not able to digitize our comic book collection, for example. We have permission usually to display most of the material that we have, because for the most part, a lot of the comic material that people know now has been published since 1924 now? 1924.
6?
Ooh, I should know this. I'm sorry. Things that are earlier newspaper strips, earlier other comic images, those you can find on our website. And as Sarah mentioned, you know, there are other websites that have digitized materials. That is not the library's collection material.
Can you search for comics and illustrations in Chronicling America?
Yes, you can. Actually, so we had a project, and I can't remember where it lives now, to tag and search images in Chronicling America. And I wish I remembered that off the top of my head. We had a recent fellow who did a project to write a computer program to help us with that. And so it was a crowdsourcing project that was amazing. You know, one of the tricky parts with searching comics and newspapers is that the optical character recognition software, which is what reads the words on the page, doesn't always recognize things in tiny comic bubbles. So searching for comic doesn't necessarily get you a whole lot. If you know the title of the comic strip or the subject of the photograph or image that you're looking for, chances are the words will come up and then you'll see the image. I think we have a blog post somewhere on the library's on the library's website, but on the blog that I write for, specifically Headlines and Heroes, and talking about that particular program and searching for images in newspapers.
Are there any other ancillary materials related to Amazing Fantasy 15 that were included with the donation of the original art? Was the cover art included, or the backup story, correspondence, etc.?
So there's no correspondence included. There are 4 stories in the comic book, and all 4 stories, all 24 pages of the art, not the advertisements, was included with the gift. The cover art was not. Some people have sat down with me, have intimated that they know where the cover art is and that it exists, but just like I don't talk about who donated the art, they haven't told me who owns the cover. So
maybe someday it will come here. For now, we have it in published form.
That's right. And that's a Jack Kirby cover. That's not a Steve Ditko cover.
Good point.
Are there any gaps in the collection of comics and original comic art that you hope to fill?
Oh, many.
So many. So many. My sort of running joke is that if anybody knows anyone who has a copy of Action Comics #1 that wants to donate it to the library, that we would be more than happy to speak with them, because at this point, Action Comics, which I think just another copy sold for $3.5 million or something, that is not in our budget. So that is a major gap that I have in my collection, for example, that a lot of people know about. I know you have
So
lots of wish list things too.
yeah, the prints and photographs division has about, I guess now about 130, 140,000 pieces of cartoon art, and that includes prints and drawings. We have a fantastic comic strip illustration collection. We have incredible ability to tell American history through original editorial cartoon drawings. But I have a sneaking suspicion that we were influenced by Frederick Wortham's Seduction of the Innocent, which came out in 1952, about the time we were amassing original cartoon art, and we did not reach out to comic book illustrators. And that is a huge gap in our collection. We have, as you can tell, Holy Grail pieces. We have lovely examples of the art form, but it's a major gap. And with auction prices being what they are, it's not in our budget to acquire by purchase.
I would love it if we had more original art to pair with the comics that we have in the collection, and then, or even the papers of artists, because I think it tells a story, and the library is so amazing. It's one of the only institutions where you can really do that, where you can see the published version, the original art, the manuscripts. We even have Frederick Wortham's manuscripts as well, so you can kind of talk about the descent, if you will, about comic books, and then the original things themselves. And so that's one of the most fun parts of my job, is getting to pair stuff. So maybe we'll be able to develop that part of the collection in the future.
What kind of paper is the comic printed on, and is it in danger of deteriorating?
Oh yes. The people in conservation use the phrase inherent vice, which is a very official way of saying that it is not good paper. It was printed on newsprint, which was not meant to be 100 years old. It was meant to be thrown away. It was cheap, it was thin, and it was meant to be sold and then tossed. And so that is one of the challenges that we have with the comic book collection, particularly early comics from the 30s, 40s, and even 50s, is that the paper is very brittle. It's very easily broken or damaged, and there really isn't a whole lot that we can do about it. We've done some work with our preservation section to help extend the life. We keep them in our vault in the dark in a controlled environment. So, but yeah, newsprint made of like acidic wood pulp was not meant to last, and that's why sometimes the colors don't look as good as they did when they were originally published, and why some things will look very different in one version versus another.
So we have two similar questions. What are your favorite comic book characters? And what are your favorite comic book movies? And the third question, what are your favorite comic books?
Do you want to go first?
So I didn't grow up reading comic books. I like to think that I got the last laugh on my parents, who forbade me from spending money, except for Mad Magazine and Cracked, because they were satire, they were acceptable. I think they were influenced by Seduction of the Innocent. So I actually favor graphic novels, and I have a great time reading them, but I'm not going to tell you what my favorites are, because I want you to go explore comic books, graphic novels, newspaper comic strips, oh yes, and our exhibit.
Oh, yes, this is a good time to mention our exhibit. The library has had a few comic art exhibits, and currently we have an exhibit up called Jeppy Gems, which is selections from a generous donation by Stephen Jeppy, and they're selections from his collection. So you can check that out online on our exhibits page.
Or come and visit us in
Yes.
person. The library is open to the
We are.
public Thursday through Saturday, and there are time tickets available to check out Jeppy Gems as well as our other wonderful exhibitions on Rosa Parks and
I don't remember. I should remember what else is up. I apologize to the exhibits office that I don't. I'll just say that I also, to go back to the question, I did not grow up reading comics either. So I love just finding new things. You know, for nostalgia purposes, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles holds a special place in my heart because it was one of the first comic books that I read, which seems very strange to say now, but I do love our Small Press Expo collection, in part because it is independently published materials. So you get comic books on food and on somebody's dog and, you know, all kinds of other things. As far as superheroes go, I don't know that I have a favorite. Again, you know, I just like exploring. So, and movies, well, I unfortunately have to admit that I haven't been to a major movie in quite some time. So I'll have to view more in the coming years.
And I think that's the last question that we have.
All right.
great. Thank you so much for making us part of your National Book Festival experience. We really appreciate that.